The massive chamber stretched out like a crystal cathedral beneath the stars. Its walls rose high into darkness while the floor gleamed with polished stone that reflected the lights of 1,000 worlds. Above them all, the great dome showed. The real sky beyond, with ships moving between planets like tiny fireflies in the endless night. Admiral Jake Morrison stood behind the thick glass barrier that separated visitors from the council floor. His uniform was clean and pressed, the blue fabric marked with the simple star and eagle of Earth. Next to him, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant held a data pad with trembling fingers. Both humans watched as the greatest gathering in known space argued about their future, the war. Council table dominated the center of the chamber. It was carved from a single piece of white stone, perfectly round, with 48 seats arranged. Around its edge, each seat was different, made to fit the body of each species that served in the Galactic Confederation. Some were tall and narrow for the bird-like Ethrons. Others were wide and low for the rock creatures from Titan Prime, the star. Delegates sat on heated platforms that kept their cold blood moving, but one seat stood apart from all the others. It was made of dark wood that seemed to glow with inner warmth. The wood was old earth oak, carved with simple patterns that spoke of home. Unlike every other seat at the table, this one sat empty. It had been empty for 300 years. The debate below grew louder as Jake watched. The reptilian star delegate stood on his warming platform and hissed his words through sharp teeth. "Humans are too violent," he said, his yellow eyes flashing with anger. "They fight wars against their own kind. They kill each other over land and resources and ideas. How can such creatures join us in keeping peace across the galaxy?" Several other delegates nodded in agreement. The insect-like representative from the hegemony worlds clicked his mandibles in a sound that meant displeasure. His compound eyes glittered as he spoke. "Humans have been in space for only 50 years. 50 years. Some of us have been traveling between stars for 50,000 years. They are children playing with fire." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had heard these arguments before many times. Earth had applied for membership in the Confederation 12 times over the past 20 years. Each time the answer had been the same: not ready, too young, too dangerous. Lisa leaned closer to him and whispered, "Sir, maybe we should just go home. This is the same as always." But Jake kept watching the empty chair. There was something about it that pulled at his attention. It was not just empty, it was waiting. The way the light fell on its carved surface, the way it sat at the head of the table where the most honored members would sit. This was not a chair for visitors or guests. This was a chair for someone important. The debate continued as the Vorth delegate spoke next. The Vorth were beings made of living crystal, and when they spoke, their voices rang like bells. "Humans show promise," the crystal being chimed, its body flashing with blue light. "Their ships are crude but effective. Their weapons are simple, but deadly. They might grow into something useful." "Useful?" The star delegate hissed again. "They destroyed 2 of their own cities with atomic fire before they even left their homeworld. They wage war like beasts, without honor or control." Jake wanted to argue, but visitors were not allowed to speak during council sessions. He could only watch and listen as his species was judged by beings who had never walked on Earth soil or breathed Earth air. Then something changed. The air in the chamber grew still as one figure rose from the shadows at the far end of the table. This was Veltar, the keeper of traditions, and when he moved, even the proudest delegates fell silent. Veltar was old beyond measure. His people, the Eternal Ones, had been traveling between stars when most other species were still learning to make fire. His body was tall and thin, covered in robes that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. When he spoke, his voice filled the chamber like distant thunder. "You speak of humans as if they are strangers," Veltar said, his ancient eyes looking around the table. "You debate their worthiness as if you have never met them before. But that chair has been empty for 3 centuries, waiting for this very day." The chamber fell completely silent, even the background hum of the environmental Systems seemed to fade away. Every delegate turned to look at the empty wooden chair. "Tell us, Keeper," the hegemony delegate clicked carefully. "Why does the chair exist? We have asked this question many times, but you have never given us a full answer." Veltar's robes shifted as he moved closer to the table. His fingers, long and pale, touched the surface of the ancient stone. "Some truths are too large to speak all at once," he said slowly. "Some stories must unfold in their proper time. But I will tell you this much. That chair was carved from wood taken from Earth itself. It was placed here not as an insult, but as recognition." Jake felt his heart begin to beat faster. Recognition of what? What could Earth have done to earn a place at this table before humans had even left their own solar system? The Skatar delegate was not satisfied with the vague answer. Recognition of what, Keeper? Humans did not exist in galactic society when this council was founded. Their homeworld was not even known to us. Veltar smiled, and the expression was both sad and knowing. "Was it not?" he asked quietly. "Are you so certain of that?" Before anyone could respond, alerts began to sound throughout the chamber. The dome above showed red warning lights as ships dropped out of hyperspace near the station. Jake looked up to see the familiar shapes of human vessels approaching, but not the small diplomatic ships that usually brought Earth delegates to these meetings. These were warships, moving fast and broadcasting emergency signals, Lisa checked. Her data pad went pale. "Sir?" she whispered urgently. "It's Admiral Cooper aboard the Constellation. She's requesting immediate emergency session with the Council. Something about deep space monitoring stations going dark." Jake watched as the Council delegates looked up at the arriving ships with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. But Veltar's face showed something different. The ancient being looked almost relieved, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The keeper of traditions turned to face the observation deck where Jake and Lisa stood. Even through the thick barrier, his eyes seemed to look directly into Jake's soul. "Admiral Morrison," Veltar said, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the chamber's sound systems. "Perhaps it is time you joined us at the table. There are things your people need to know about that empty chair?" The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized that the human observers were being invited to participate in the council session. This had never happened before in the Confederation's history, but Jake found himself walking toward the chamber doors, drawn by something he could not name. As the doors opened and he stepped onto the council floor for the first time, Jake's eyes were drawn again to the empty wooden chair. Up close, he could see more details in its carving. There were symbols there that looked almost familiar, like something from half-remembered dreams. The chair was waiting for someone. And Jake was beginning to suspect that someone was not just any human, it was someone very specific. Someone whose story was about to change everything. 3 days after the emergency council session, Dr. Amanda Price stood in her laboratory aboard the orbital research station New Geneva. The walls around her were covered with holographic displays showing ancient ruins from dozens of different worlds. Each image told the same impossible story, and Amanda could barely believe what she was seeing. She had been studying alien archaeology for 15 years, ever since humanity first made contact with the Galactic Confederation. Her job was to understand the history of other species, to learn from their past mistakes and victories. But what she had discovered in the past week changed everything she thought she knew about human history. The door to her lab opened with a soft hiss, and Admiral Jake Morrison walked in, followed by General Robert Hayes. Both men looked tired after the long emergency meetings with Earth Command. Jake's uniform was wrinkled, and his eyes showed the strain of too little sleep. "Dr. Price," Jake said as he approached her workstation, "you said you had found something important. Something that might explain what happened at the council meeting." Amanda nodded and gestured to the displays around them. "Admiral, what? I'm about to show you will sound impossible. But I have verified every piece of data multiple times. The evidence is solid." She touched a control panel, and the largest hologram shifted to show a barren planet covered in strange metal structures. "This is Kethmar, the homeworld of the Scar people. These ruins date back 800 years to a time when the Scar were fighting for their independence from the Velcrin Empire. General Hayes studied the image carefully. I've read about that war. The Scar were losing badly until something changed the tide of battle. Their histories talk about mysterious ships that appeared and helped them win. Exactly, Amanda said, her voice growing excited. But look at these markings on the ruins. Look at the weapon signatures burned into the metal structures. She zoomed in on several sections of the destroyed buildings. The metal was twisted and melted in patterns that formed clear shapes. Jake stepped closer to get a better view and felt his blood grow cold. The burn marks looked exactly like the damage pattern created by human plasma cannons. That's impossible, Jake said quietly. We didn't even have plasma weapons 800 years ago. We were still using gunpowder and steel. Amanda moved to another display showing a different world. This one was covered in beautiful crystal formations that sparkled like diamonds under twin suns. This is the Vorth homeworld. 3,000 years ago, a plague swept through their population. It was killing their crystal bodies from the inside. Turning them to dust, they were facing complete extinction. The image changed to show ancient Vorth writings carved into stone monuments. The crystalline script was elegant and flowing, telling stories of their darkest hour. According to their records, Amanda continued, ships appeared in their system just when all hope was lost. The ships brought medicine that saved their entire species. Medicine that was specifically designed to work with crystalline biology. General Hayes frowned as he studied the alien writing. What kind of ships? Did they describe them? Amanda touched another control and a new image appeared. It was clearly ancient, carved in stone by Vorth artists thousands of years ago, but the shape it showed was unmistakable. The ships in the carving looked exactly like human vessels, with the same hull design and engine configuration that Earth used today. This is just the beginning, Amanda said, her voice growing more urgent. I found similar evidence on 47 different worlds. Every single member species of the Galactic Confederation has stories about mysterious ships that appeared during their worst crises. Ships that fought impossible battles, saved entire civilizations, then disappeared without asking for anything. In return, she brought up a massive display that showed the entire galaxy. Dozens of star systems were marked with red dots, each one representing a world where the mysterious ships had appeared. The pattern spread across thousands of light years and spanned thousands of years of history. Jake studied the display with growing amazement and fear. Amanda, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying that human ships have been appearing throughout galactic history for millennia. Long before we had space travel, long before we even knew other species existed. She paused and looked directly at both men. I think we've been time travelers, Jake. I think future humans have been going back in time to save these civilizations. The lab fell silent except for the soft hum of the computers. General Hayes sat down heavily in a nearby chair, his face pale with shock. Time travel is theoretical at best. We don't have that technology. We don't have it now, Amanda corrected. But these records suggest we will have it someday. And when we do, we use it to help others. She moved to another section of displays showing battlefield analysis from dozens of different conflicts. Look at the tactics used in these battles. Every single one shows the same fighting style, aggressive but protective, willing to take enormous risks to save civilian populations. The mysterious ships always focused on protecting the innocent rather than just winning battles. Jake recognized the pattern immediately. It was exactly how human military forces operated. Protect the weak, never leave anyone behind, fight harder when others are in danger. This is how we fight, he said softly. Exactly. And there's more. Amanda brought up linguistic analysis of the ancient records. Several species have legends about warriors who spoke a language that sounds remarkably similar to ancient Earth languages. The hegemony archives contain recordings that their linguists say match Proto-English root words. General Hayes stood up and began pacing around the lab. Even if this is true, even if humans from the future have been helping these species, why? What would make us go back in time to fight their battles? Amanda had been wondering the same thing. She brought up one final display that showed a timeline of galactic history. I think I know the answer to that. Look at this pattern. Every time the mysterious human ships appear, they're fighting the same enemy. The timeline showed battles across dozens of worlds and thousands of years. But in every single case, the enemy was described in the same way. Dark ships that consumed everything they touched. Beings that seemed to be made of living shadow. An enemy that left nothing behind but empty space. The ancient records call them different names, Amanda explained. The Devourers, the Dark Fleet, the Void Walkers. But they're all describing the same thing. Something that wants to destroy all life in the galaxy. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You think future humans discovered some kind of galactic threat, something so dangerous that they had to go back in time to stop it? More than that, Amanda said grimly. I think that threat is still out there, still growing stronger. And I think the reason the Galactic War Council keeps that empty chair is because they know humanity's true role in galactic history. We're not just another species asking to join their club. She turned off all the displays except one. It showed the familiar image of the empty wooden chair in the council chamber. Were their guardians, their protectors, the species that has been saving them all along, even though most of them have forgotten or chosen not to remember. General Hayes stopped pacing and looked at both of them with determination in his eyes. We need to contact Earth Command immediately. If there's even a chance this is true, if there's some future threat that requires time travel to stop, then we need to start preparing now. But Jake was thinking about something else. He remembered the way Veltar had looked at him during the council session. The ancient being had known something, had been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. I don't think we're the first to figure this out, he said slowly. I think some of them already know the truth about that empty chair, Amanda nodded in agreement. The question is, what are they waiting for? What needs to happen before they tell us the whole story? Outside the laboratory windows, the stars continued their eternal dance across the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, in a future that might never come to pass, human ships were fighting battles that had already been won. And somewhere else in that same darkness, an enemy waited that would require everything humanity could give to defeat. The quantum communication array aboard New Geneva hummed with strange energy as technicians worked to establish a connection that should have been impossible. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the secure communications room, watching as his chief science officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant, made final adjustments to equipment that pushed the limits of human technology. The Temporal Research Division was very specific about the frequency, Lisa said as she calibrated the quantum transmitter. They said someone would be waiting on this channel, but they wouldn't tell me who. Jake had received the classified message from Earth Command just 6 hours ago. Deep space monitoring stations had detected something moving in the Outer Rim territories. Something that matched the energy signatures from Dr. Price's ancient battlefield recordings. But more disturbing was the second part of the message. Earth's most secret research division claimed they had made contact with someone who could explain everything about the empty chair. The transmitter powered up with a low whine that made everyone in the room step back. Energy crackled between the quantum field generators as reality itself seemed to bend around the communication array. Then suddenly, the air in front of them shimmered and a figure began to materialize. The hologram that formed was clearly human, but something was wrong with the image. The man who appeared was wearing a uniform that Jake had never seen before. The insignia on his shoulders showed rank markings that didn't exist in any current military system. Most disturbing of all, the man's face was weathered and scarred, in ways that spoke of battles Jake couldn't imagine. Admiral Morrison, the figure said, his voice carrying clearly through the quantum link despite the crackling interference. I'm Captain Alex Stone of the temporal research vessel Kronos. I've been waiting a long time for this conversation. Jake stepped forward, still trying to understand what he was seeing. Captain Stone, your uniform doesn't match any current Earth military design. What branch of service are you with? Stone smiled, but the expression was tired and sad. I serve in a branch that doesn't exist yet in your timeline. Admiral, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but everything Dr. Price discovered is true. Future humanity has been traveling back in time to save alien civilizations for centuries. Lisa checked her instruments and frowned. Sir, according to our readings, this transmission is coming from approximately 300 years in the future. But that should be impossible with our current technology. It's not your technology making this possible, Stone explained. We're using temporal manipulation devices that your civilization will develop over the next 2 centuries. The same technology we used to travel back in time to fight the war. General Hayes, who had arrived just as the connection was established, stepped into view of the transmitter. What war, Captain? Dr. Price found evidence of battles across thousands of years, but we don't understand what humanity was fighting. Stone's expression darkened and the hologram flickered as interference increased. The enemy calls itself the Void Collective. It's a hive mind entity that consumes entire galaxies. We've been fighting them across multiple timelines, trying to save as many civilizations as possible. The captain gestured and additional data began transmitting through the quantum link. Lisa's computers filled with tactical information showing ship designs and battle formations that were far beyond anything currently in human possession. The collective doesn't just destroy civilizations, Stone continued. It erases them completely from existence. When they finish with a galaxy, it's like those species never existed at all. No ruins, no artifacts, no memory of them anywhere in the universe. Jake studied the tactical data and felt his blood run cold. The enemy ships shown in the files were massive, organic-looking things that seemed to bend space around them. How many galaxies have they destroyed? We don't know for certain, Stone admitted. Thousands, maybe millions. The collective has been spreading across the universe for eons. Our galaxy was supposed to be consumed 800 years ago, but we managed to create a stable time loop that lets us keep fighting the same battles over and over. General Hayes leaned forward with growing concern. A time loop? What does that mean exactly? Stone's image wavered as the quantum connection grew unstable. It means we travel back in time to save civilizations that would have been destroyed. Those civilizations survived to form the Galactic Confederation. The Confederation eventually develops the technology that lets us travel back in time. It's a closed loop where effect creates cause. Lisa's instruments began registering massive power fluctuations. Sir, I'm reading temporal distortions throughout this sector. Whatever they're doing in the future, it's affecting space-time in our present. The loop is breaking down, Stone said urgently. We've been fighting this war for centuries of subjective time, but maintaining the paradox is becoming harder. That's why we contacted you now? The final battle is approaching, and this time we can't fight it alone. Jake tried to process the implications of what he was hearing. You're saying that every species in the Galactic Confederation exists because future humans saved them? Exactly. The Scar would have been enslaved and eventually consumed by the Void Collective. The Vorth Plague was actually a collective bioweapon. The hegemony worlds were under direct attack when we intervened. Stone paused as his image flickered more violently. 47 different species, 47 different interventions, all to create a timeline where the galaxy has a chance to survive. The hologram began to break apart as quantum interference reached critical levels. Admiral, the empty chair. In the War Council exists because they know the truth. Some of them remember our interventions, even though most choose to forget. The chair waits for the day when present-day humanity joins the fight as equals rather than temporal guardians. General Hayes stepped closer to the transmitter. What do you need from us, Captain? How can we help end this war? Stone's voice was fading as the connection destabilized. The collective has found our temporal manipulation stations. They're launching an assault across all timelines simultaneously. If they succeed, every intervention we've ever made will be undone. Every species we saved will die, and the loop will collapse. The tactical data on Lisa's screens began showing real-time battle information. Massive fleets engaged in combat across dozens of star systems, with human ships fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. But these weren't future battles. The timestamps showed they were happening right now, in the present. The war isn't just in the future anymore, Stone said as his image became barely visible. The collective is attacking your timeline directly. They know that if they can destroy present-day humanity, the temporal loop will never form and all our past victories will become meaningless. Jake realized the terrible truth. That's why the emergency alerts. That's why our deep space stations went dark. They're already here. The final battle begins now. Stone's voice was barely audible through the static. Everything we've fought for across centuries comes down to what happens in the next few days. You have to get the Galactic Confederation to work together. You have to make them remember why that chair was placed at their table. The hologram flickered one last time before disappearing completely. The quantum transmitter powered down with a whine of cooling metal, leaving the room in stunned silence. Lisa was the first to speak, her voice shaky with fear. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures moving toward Confederation space. Whatever this void collective is, it's not waiting for us to prepare. Jake looked at the tactical data still displayed on the screens around them. The battle formations and weapon specifications from 300 years in the future represented humanity's only hope of survival. But first they had to convince 47 different alien species to trust them enough to fight together. "Get me a direct line to Veltar," Jake ordered. "It's time to find out exactly what the Keeper of Traditions has been keeping from the rest of the galaxy. And Lisa, send everything we just received to Earth Command. If we're going to save the timeline, we need every ship we can get." Outside the station's windows, space began to ripple with unnatural distortions as reality itself prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of existence itself. Veltar led Admiral Jake Morrison and Dr. Amanda Price through corridors that seemed to exist outside of normal space and time. The walls around them shifted like liquid silver while strange lights danced in patterns that hurt to look at directly. They were walking through the Confederation's most sacred archives, a place where time moved differently and secrets older than most civilizations were kept safe from prying eyes. "Your species has always been special," Veltar said as they walked deeper into the impossible structure, "but not in the way most beings think. Humans do not have the strongest ships or the most advanced weapons. What makes you unique is your relationship with causality itself." Jake still struggled to understand what the Ancient Keeper meant. The emergency session with the War Council had ended in chaos, when long-range sensors detected the approaching Void Collective fleet. Most delegates had fled back to their homeworlds to prepare defenses, but Veltar had asked Jake and Amanda to stay behind for this private meeting. "Keeper," Amanda said carefully as they entered a vast chamber filled with floating crystals that glowed with inner light. "Captain Stone told us about the time loop. He said future humans have been saving galactic civilizations for centuries. Is that why the empty chair exists?" Veltar stopped walking and turned to face them both. His ancient eyes held knowledge that seemed to stretch back to the beginning of time itself. "The chair exists because we remember, Dr. Price. Perhaps not all of us, and perhaps not clearly, but we remember the ships that came when all hope was lost." He gestured to the crystals around them, and they began to pulse with brighter light. Images formed in the air between the glowing stones, showing scenes from across galactic history. Jake watched in amazement as human ships appeared in battle. After battle, saving species that would have been destroyed without intervention. "The Star were not just fighting for independence," Veltar continued as the images shifted. "They were the last free world in a sector being consumed by something they called the Dark Hunger. Our histories say mysterious ships appeared from nowhere and taught them how to fight an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The crystal images showed reptilian warriors fighting alongside human soldiers against creatures that seemed made of living shadow. The battles were desperate and brutal, but somehow the combined forces managed to drive back the darkness." "The Vorth faced something similar," Veltar said as new images formed. What they called a plague was actually a weapon designed to corrupt their crystal matrix from within. The medicine that saved them came from ships that understood both human biology and crystalline structure. Ships that should not have existed yet. Amanda watched the scenes with growing understanding. Every intervention was against the same enemy. The Void Collective has been trying to consume the galaxy for thousands of years. Longer than that, Valtar corrected her gently. The enemy you call the Void Collective is older than our galaxy itself. It has devoured countless other galaxies across the universe. What makes this galaxy special is that someone found a way to fight back. Jake studied the crystal recordings more carefully. In every scene, the human ships fought with tactics that seemed familiar yet impossible. They used weapons that wouldn't be invented for centuries, but the fighting style was unmistakably human. Protect the innocent, never abandon allies, fight harder when others are in danger. How many species did future humans save? Jake asked. Veltar smiled sadly. In this timeline? All 47 member species of the Confederation owe their existence to human intervention. But the cost grows higher each time the loop resets. He led them deeper into the archive chamber where larger crystals held more complex recordings. These showed space battles on a scale that dwarfed anything Jake had ever seen. Thousands of ships engaged in combat across multiple star systems, while reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the fighting. Your future selves have been fighting this war for 300 years of subjective time, Veltar explained. Each battle ages them, each intervention requires more resources, each reset of the time loop becomes harder to maintain. Amanda studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The loop is breaking down, isn't it? That's why Captain Stone contacted us now. The paradox cannot hold forever, Veltar agreed. Your future selves knew this day would come. The day when present-day humanity would have to take up the fight without the advantage of time travel. Jake watched human ships from 3 centuries in the future fighting desperately against the organic-looking vessels of the Void Collective. The future humans were winning most battles, but barely and at terrible cost. Why didn't they just tell us the truth from the beginning? Why all the secrecy? Because knowledge of the future changes the future, Veltar said simply. If present-day humanity knew what was coming too early, you might develop differently. You might become a species focused only on preparing for war instead of the species that naturally protects others. The Keeper gestured to another set of crystals that showed scenes from Earth's history. Humans helping each other during disasters. Soldiers risking their lives to save civilians, people from different nations working together to solve global problems. The reason future humans became temporal guardians is because present-day humans are natural guardians, Veltar explained. You protect others not because you have to, but because you cannot bear to see them suffer. That instinct, that drive to help is what makes the time loop possible. Amanda realized the deeper truth. The empty chair isn't just recognition of what future humans have done. It's faith in what present-day humans will do when the time comes. Exactly, Veltar said with approval. The chair waits for the moment when humanity joins the Confederation not as mysterious saviors from tomorrow, but as partners fighting alongside us today. Jake looked at the tactical recordings showing the approaching Void Collective fleet. The enemy ships numbered in the millions, far more than all Confederation forces combined. Do we have any chance of winning without time travel? Veltar's expression grew serious as he showed them one final crystal recording. This one showed the current timeline, with Void ships moving toward Confederation space while human vessels scrambled to intercept them. But there was something different about this battle. Other ships were joining the human fleet. Star cruisers, Vorth crystal ships, hegemony battle cruisers. Your future selves learned something important during their centuries of fighting, Veltar said. The Void Collective can be defeated, but not by any single species. It requires all of us working together with perfect trust and coordination. That's why the War Council exists, Jake realized. Not just to make political decisions, but to prepare for this moment, Veltar nodded approvingly. Every species In the Confederation was saved by humans at some point in their history. Deep down, they all know they owe humanity a debt. But more than that, they know humans are the one species that fights not for conquest or glory, but simply because someone needs to fight. The crystal recordings began to fade as the archive chamber prepared to close. But before the images disappeared completely, Jake saw something that filled him with both hope and terror. In the final scenes, the empty wooden chair from the war. Council chamber was no longer empty. A figure sat there, coordinating the combined fleets of 47 different species in perfect harmony. The loop closes when humanity finally takes their rightful place at the table, Veltar said as they began walking back toward the normal corridors. Not as saviors from the future, but as leaders in the present. The question is whether present-day humans are ready to carry that responsibility. Jake thought about Captain Stone's weathered face and the desperate battles being fought across time itself. Somewhere in the future, humans who had aged centuries fighting an impossible war were holding the line until help could arrive. Help. That could only come from the past, from Jake's own timeline. Keeper, Jake said as they reached the exit. When the War Council meets again, will the other species follow humanity's lead? Veltar paused at the threshold between the archive and normal space. Admiral Morrison, they have been waiting 300 years for someone to finally sit in that chair. The real question is whether you are ready to accept what it means to be humanity's representative at the table where the fate of the galaxy is decided. Outside in normal space, emergency alerts were already sounding as the fastest void ships reached the outer edge of Confederation territory. The final battle was beginning, and this time there would be no reset, no second chances, no help from the future. This time, humanity would have to save the galaxy the hard way. The Void Collective's invasion fleet emerged from dark space like a spreading disease across the galaxy. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching as millions of organic ships materialized around every major star system in Confederation territory. The enemy vessels looked like they were grown rather than built, their surfaces pulsing with veins of dark energy that seemed to absorb light itself. Sir, we're receiving surrender demands from the lead collective vessel, Lieutenant Commander. Lisa Grant reported from her station. They're offering to let some populations survive as ... livestock. Jake's jaw tightened as he studied the tactical display. Earth's entire defense fleet numbered barely 200 ships, while the Void Collective had brought enough vessels to blot out stars. Around the galaxy, other Confederation species were facing the same impossible odds. Any word from the other species? Jake asked. Lisa checked her communications board and shook her head. The Starfleet is falling back to their home system. The Vorth have gone silent. Most of the hegemony worlds are broadcasting evacuation orders. Jake wasn't surprised. Every species was doing exactly what made sense, protecting their own people first. But as he watched the enemy fleet begin its advance, he knew that fighting alone would doom them all. Then space began to ripple near the Defiant's position. Temporal distortions opened like wounds in reality, and through them came ships that shouldn't exist. Captain Alex Stone's temporal research vessel Kronos materialized first, followed by dozens of human ships from 300 years in the future. Stone's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his uniform showing new damage from recent battles. Admiral Morrison, we've managed to break through for one final intervention, but our temporal manipulators are failing. We can only maintain this timeline breach for a few hours. Jake studied the future fleet with a mixture of hope and despair. The ships were powerful beyond anything in his timeline, but they looked exhausted. Battle damage covered every hull, and some vessels could barely maintain formation. Captain, how many ships do you have? 57 vessels, all that's left of our temporal defense force, Stone replied grimly. We've been fighting across multiple timelines for centuries, Admiral. This is our last stand. If we lose here, the loop collapses and everything we've saved dies with us. The tactical situation was still hopeless. Even with the future fleet, humanity was outnumbered 1,000 to 1. But as Jake watched the enemy advance, he made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel to all Confederation species," he ordered Lisa, "all of them. Emergency override on every communication frequency." Lisa's fingers flew over her controls. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to 47 different species across the galaxy." Jake took a deep breath and began speaking words that would echo across galactic history. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of Earth. I know most of you are preparing to defend your homeworlds. I know you think fighting alone gives you the best chance of survival, but I'm asking you to remember something that some of you have forgotten. On screens throughout the galaxy, representatives of every Confederation species stopped what they were doing to listen. Even the proud star delegates paused their evacuation orders. 300 years ago, your ancestors placed an empty chair at the War Council table. They carved it from earthwood and positioned it at the head of the table in the place of highest honor. They did this not because humans had earned it through conquest or politics, but because they remembered something important." Jake gestured to Captain Stone's future fleet, now engaged in desperate combat with Void Collective ships. They remembered that when your civilizations faced extinction, mysterious ships appeared to save you. Ships that fought impossible battles and asked for nothing in return. Ships that were willing to die for people they had never met. In the Star Command Center, Admiral Decano watched human vessels from the future sacrificing themselves to protect SS Katar colony worlds. His reptilian features showed confusion and growing understanding. "The Star remember ships that taught you how to fight the dark hunger," Jake continued. "The Vorth remember medicine that saved your entire species from extinction. Every single member of the Confederation exists because someone was willing to fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourselves." On the crystalline world of Vorth Prime, the Governing Council watched as future human ships formed protective barriers around their crystal cities, taking terrible damage to shield innocent civilians from void weapons. "That empty chair was never about us being better than you," Jake said, his voice carrying across the galaxy. "It was about us being willing to stand together when everything seemed lost. Today, I'm not asking you to follow human leadership. I'm asking you to remember what we've always fought for, each other." The response started slowly. A single star cruiser broke from defensive formation and moved to support human forces. Then a Vorth crystal ship joined them, its weapons harmonizing with human plasma cannons in perfect coordination. "Sir," Lisa reported with growing excitement, "we're receiving tactical coordination requests from multiple species. They want to form a combined battle group." Soon the space around Earth filled with ships from across the galaxy. Star vessels, with their distinctive weapon pods, crystalline Vorth ships that sang as they fired, massive hegemony battle cruisers with their insect crews working in perfect unity. Species that had barely cooperated for centuries were now fighting as one fleet. Jake realized what was happening. This isn't about following our orders. They're choosing to fight together because it's right. The battle turned when the combined fleet used tactics that no single species could have developed. Future human ships provided temporal coordination, while present-day vessels served as the backbone of the formation. Starships used their superior speed to strike at enemy weak points that Vorth crystalline sensors had identified. Hegemony vessels provided massive firepower, while smaller ships from dozens of other species filled support roles with perfect precision. Captain Stone's face appeared on screen one final time as his ship began to fade from existence. "Admiral, the temporal loop is closing. We can't maintain the breach any longer. Captain, did we win?" Jake asked urgently. Stone smiled, and for the first time since Jake had met him, the future officer looked truly happy. "Look around you, Admiral. For the first time in 300 years of fighting, we're not alone." The future fleet disappeared back into their timeline as space returned to normal, but the battle was far from over. Void Collective ships were still advancing, still outnumbering the Confederation forces by enormous margins. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," Jake broadcast to the combined fleet. "Today we find out if the galaxy is worth saving. Follow my lead, protect each other, and show these creatures what happens when free beings stand together. The final battle raged for 18 hours across dozens of star systems. The Void Collective fought with the fury of a hive mind that had consumed galaxies, but they had never faced an enemy like this. 47 different species, each with their own strengths and abilities, fighting with perfect trust and coordination. When the last void ship finally crumbled into dark matter, the galaxy fell silent except for the sound of celebration across 1,000 worlds. Jake found himself back in the War Council chamber 3 days later. The great table was full now, with delegates from every member species present for the first time in decades. But their attention was focused on one particular seat. The empty chair sat waiting, as it had for 300 years. Veltar's ancient voice filled the chamber as Jake approached the wooden seat. Admiral Morrison, the chair has been waiting. For someone who understands that true strength comes not from standing apart, but from bringing others together. Jake sat down in the chair carved from earth oak and immediately felt its warmth spreading through him. It wasn't the warmth of wood and polish, it was the warmth of coming home after a long journey. The 48th seat is finally filled, Veltar announced to the gathered delegates. Now the real work begins. Building a galaxy where no species stands alone, where every world is protected, and where the empty chair reminds us that the greatest leaders are those who serve others. Outside the chamber windows, human ships flew in formation with vessels from across the galaxy. The temporal loop was closed, the future was secure, and for the first time in galactic history, the War Council was complete. The empty chair would remain in the histories as a symbol of hope, proof that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from those who seek power, but from those who are willing to sacrifice everything to protect others. And in the depths of space, if anyone was listening carefully, they might hear the faint echo of future voices saying thank you to the past that had finally caught up with tomorrow.